Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad to have you with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Garrity once again joining us from Wisconsin today, and he has put together a Herculean effort technologically to be with us today. So, Jim, thanks for your perseverance. Great to have you with us. Sorry about the Jets game last night, but congrats on Davante Adams reportedly heading to New York and reuniting with Aaron Rodgers. So I'm sure you would have rather had the win, but at least there's a little bit of a silver lining there.
I was going to say, as I just observed on Twitter, Greg, Aaron Rodgers was famously reliable and ageless and super accurate. And then he became a Jet, and he immediately tore his Achilles, and he's been looked very old and very hit and miss since then. Tyron Smith was the legendary left tackle of the Dallas Cowboys. Never let more than three sacks in a year. He's allowed 4 sacks so far in 6 games. Mike Williams, Chargers wide receiver, superstar, huge, fast, everything you want in a receiver. 10 catches in 6 games so far this year. The moment you put on a Jets uniform, you get worse. You just get suddenly exponentially worse. So Davante Adams is going to stink. Not because he's actually a bad athlete, but because the moment you put on that green uniform, all the talent just gets absorbed somehow, and it just kind of dissipates. So I'm in a pretty foul mood today, Greg. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about good martinis.
Kryptonite was green, but it's just a point I'll make from Superman. But anyway, let's get to our good martini. And all the people who are supposed to be out there helping Kamala Harris, not helping so much. Joe Biden keeps scheduling public events while she's having public events. Keeps talking about how they were like this, not a minute's daylight between them on all major decisions, which she has now validated. So it's not even like he's going against her narrative on that. Then Barack Obama goes out and yells at black men for not being supportive enough. So the latest is Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton got sent down to Georgia. And so the issue of immigration came up. And of course, that's one of the big issues that's to Trump's advantage. The reckless Biden-Harris border policy has allowed people into the country, way too many of whom have committed crimes, some of them incredibly violent crimes, including the murder of Laken Riley near the University of Georgia campus earlier this year. So Clinton actually brings this up and seems, Jim, on a number of fronts to counter what the left would normally be saying about this.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted, and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up, so we need immigrants that have been vetted to do work, there wouldn't be a problem. And he couldn't keep people all torn up and upset.
Well, there's lots of problems for the Harris campaign with that comment. First of all, he's basically saying people are not properly vetted at the border, which is a huge condemnation of the Biden-Harris border. And then he says, if they were properly vetted, we actually need them in this country because we're not having enough babies. And while I think Clinton and I would disagree pretty severely about the need to import that many non-Americans to fill jobs, certainly at the numbers we've seen over the past few years, he's still deliciously undermining 2 of their most ridiculous arguments when it comes to population, including their number one issue in this cycle, which is abortion, abortion, abortion all the time. And then he's saying, we need, our population's not big enough, which flies in the face of the whole WEF argument that we have way too many people on the planet, the Bill Gates argument and so forth. And so rolling out a 78-year-old Bill Clinton, I don't know if he forgot which candidate he was stumping for there, but in the end, speaking truth, perhaps unintentionally, in a way that's not going to help his candidate.
First of all, Greg, no one makes me feel older than watching Bill Clinton as an old man. And that voice, that is not what we're used to. We saw it at the Democratic convention, and just there's not that same, there's a lilt to that voice. And boy, let me tell you, Greg, when it comes to a problem of impregnating Americans, nobody has been put more effort into it than I have. So in the back of my mind, let's say Trump wins. 3 Democrats have run against Donald Trump. 2 of them lost. One won, but kind of narrowly. And he was a older white male, the most, one of the most established names in Democratic politics for a long time. There'll be a lot of people who will blame it to sexism, But a lot of people say, I think there'll also be a lot of people who say, hey, maybe beating Donald Trump isn't as easy as people think it is. And pointing out that, Joe Biden, the guy who had beaten him, was losing when he went into that debate, did disastrously in that debate and had to withdraw. So, three of them, they nearly went 0 for 3. Came within a couple of, 10,000 votes here, 20,000 votes there, not beating Donald Trump any of 3 times. If Kamala Harris wins, well, then the only person who's lost to Donald Trump is Hillary Clinton. And we've already talked about how the infamy that comes with that title and that status. So I guess every now and then I just kind of wonder if you're Bill Clinton, assuming that you still think highly of Hillary Clinton, and they had this very sweet anniversary tweets back and forth to each other, whether Bill Clinton really wants, Hillary Clinton to have that status, or whether some part of him wouldn't mind Kamala Harris also sharing that ignoble title. But yeah, the other thing is I also think, like, as much as you and I, or at least we can't stand Bill Clinton, and I will never not take that shot to make a sex joke about Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton always took that shot. So however, he was a guy who grew up. I think I may have described him, use these words, poor white trash, right? He grew up not privileged. He grew up in some very tough circumstances. And so he did not have a contempt to white working class people that a certain other prominent Democrats have seemed to have. Bill Clinton gives off a very different vibe than John Kerry discussing Genghis Khan, or Barack Obama, or a bunch of these folks. And so I remember back in, I think it was 2016 or so, he was saying something like, there are a whole bunch of people who don't see themselves in Barack Obama's portrait of the country. And it sounds like he was not the strongest voice in the room, not metaphorically or literally, when it came to all those advisors. And probably the Hillary Clinton campaign wishes they'd listened to Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton knew how to win votes in the South, and knew how to win votes in places that Democrats absolutely cannot win votes anymore. So yeah, he's going off message here. But I think he might there's a subtle message of Democrats. This is something you need to address. This is something you need to acknowledge. You can't just hand wave it away. This probably is Bill Clinton going rogue. And at 78, you're not going to be as disciplined in your message, and you're much more likely to blurt out whatever pops into your head. But I think there's something to that. And I also think the acknowledgement that we need more Americans. We need more, the birth rate dropping is a bad sign. It is a sign of people's lives not coming. People aren't getting married. People aren't having kids. People aren't starting families. People aren't putting down roots. Do whatever you want to do in your life, but this is a good thing to do, says the author of Heavy Lifting. And so this is, if people aren't doing it, this is a problem. This is something that, government should not just shrug it off. And I don't know if Democrats are really comfortable with that. I mean, the awkwardness of the "I'm a man" message from the Jimmy Kimmel producers is a sign that they understand the concept, but it's like it's translated from a foreign language or something like that. They are not speaking family formation as if it's their first language. I don't know. Maybe Emhoff has to knock some sense into him.
Well, think about where they were. Remember Julia, the digital figure with no eyes, and the government took care of her from
Little Orphan Annie was like, "Where are her pupils?"
Yes, exactly right. And there was never a husband involved anywhere along the way. She just, got pregnant and had the government take care of her all along. That's like the left's vision of this. But it's fun to watch him contradict some of these really empty slogans from the left, particularly about the birth rate, because we just keep hearing more and more and more. There's way too many people, climate change, and one of the reasons people are having fewer kids is because the left's constantly telling them the world's going to explode in a few years because it's going to catch fire spontaneously from our rapidly rising temperatures. So when it's all doom and gloom, not a surprise when people aren't exactly excited about having the next generation.
It says something about the Democratic Party that you and I can speak somewhat nostalgically about Bill Clinton. That recognition of safe, legal, and rare, like that acknowledgement and rare was that little, I don't want to say an olive branch to pro-lifers, but just this acknowledgement that some people had moral qualms or concerns about abortion. The era of big government is over. The sister soldier moment. Bill Clinton won in a country that was 4 years removed from Ronald Reagan. Right? This is a guy who knew how to win when the culture was much more conservative than it is today, and it's an instinct that I think most Democrats have forgotten. I think it's very clear. You watch, Harris and Walz stumbling around. They They could never win in 1980s, 1990s America.
So 30 years ago, you had the Democrats feeling squeamish about their position on abortion and trying to couch the language to make them seem less threatening. Now you got the Democrats out there not having any sort of limitations whatsoever that they want. And it's the Republican ticket who's trying to couch the language in a way that they think will help them. It's not a good shift, in my opinion, on that. But anyway, let's talk about Oracle, because when it comes to artificial intelligence, it might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without your costs spiraling out of control? Well, it's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. It's called Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds.
If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, it's October 15th, which means we've got, 21 days until Election Day 2024. And one of our good martinis not that long ago, along with a couple other states, Virginia cleaned up its voter rolls. Alabama did the same, and I think Texas did the same as well. And the reason it was important is that they found over 6,300 names that should not be active voters in Virginia. A lot of them were dead. A lot of them had been moved. But there were also a significant number of non-citizens registered to vote. And so Virginia said, okay, you've got a certain amount of time to prove that you're no longer a non-citizen if you want to vote. Otherwise, we're trimming this. The Department of Justice, however, will not abide by this. They say that this has come within 90 days of an election, and that's not okay. Glenn Youngkin, however, saying that he is following precedent. He says this is a 2006 law that he's following, signed by Governor Tim Kaine, and followed by both Terry McAuliffe and Ralph Northam, who made changes to the voting rolls as late as October. Youngkin's numbers were well before October. Meanwhile, Youngkin defending what he did and saying that the DOJ is the one playing politics here.
We go through a process of notifying the registrar that they need to be told that if they cannot affirm their citizenship in 14 days, they're taken off the voter roll. And this is the process that the Department of Justice, 25 days before a presidential election, turns around and says, you must stop doing this. And that is unbelievable to me. I mean, here I am, a governor, mandated, and oh, by the way, proud to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and by law to make sure that we have clean voter rolls. And the Department of Justice shows up 25 days before a presidential election and says, stop doing that.
Jim, we saw this during the Eric Holder years as well, when some states, I think Florida was one of them at the time, this is before DeSantis was governor, saying that they wanted to clean up their rolls. No, you can't do that. You might disenfranchise someone. And so whether it's dead people, whether it's people who moved, which is the vast majority of these cases, or people who aren't eligible to vote for a variety of reasons, including being a non-citizen, the left is always the ones fighting against it. And so you got to ask yourself why.
We should point out, and I think that kind of almost makes this entire controversy, I don't want to say moot, but if you go to the polling place and they say, well, actually, we took you off the polls because you're a non-citizen, or I suppose dead, and that would be another reason we're like, oh, you seem to not, you're looking better now. Maybe you're not dead. You still get a provisional ballot, and you have a certain amount of time to demonstrate that you are a citizen and or alive. I think that'd be pretty easy to prove. So in other words, really, this is not disenfranchising anybody. The only way you get disenfranchised is if you are somehow erroneously taken off. If you are a citizen and for some reason the state thinks you are not a citizen. Now, in Virginia, you have to give your whole Social Security number. And most people do the registration to vote while they're getting their driver's license. So all of this stuff should be a non-issue for 99% of voters, 99.9% of voters. This is actually an exceptionally small amount. And chances are something has happened to make the state believe that you're a non-citizen or dead. Probably death would be my guess of what caused them to do that, to make that assumption about you, right? You have a point. You show your proof. Here is my proof of citizenship, and it's taken care of. So this really, nobody should be disenfranchised by any of this. But the idea that this is going to cause large-scale disenfranchisement, this kind of demonstrates that any effort to take anybody off the voter rolls is to the Democratic Party inherently suspicious. It is inherently, in their minds, voter suppression. Never mind the fact that we want citizens to vote. We want non-citizens to not vote. Oh, by the way, District of Columbia had a push to have non-citizens voting in city elections. Under the Constitution, non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. But if a state wanted to change the rules, or if a locality wanted to change the rules, they could theoretically offer the vote to non-citizens for those, local and state offices. I think it's a terrible idea. And I think it got derailed up in New York City a couple of years ago. I don't think it came to fruition in the District of Columbia. There was a push for it. And my attitude is, once you do that, you have devalued citizenship, right? By the way, people who move into this country who are in the process of getting their green card, they came here legally, they deserve all the protections of law. But citizenship, it's supposed to be a privilege. It's supposed to be something that makes it special. If you get all the same rights just by showing up, well, then what's the point of citizenship? It is a devaluing of it. Now, usually Democrats stick to devaluing currency. But the actual, they're just as happy to devalue what it means to be a citizen by saying, really, your vote, to vote, you should just be here. That's all it takes. That's all it requires. You don't have to pass the citizenship test. You don't have to wait for your green card, any of that kind of stuff. So very suspicious, very unnerving. Youngkin is completely in the right here. He knows his facts. By the way, isn't it refreshing to have a Republican lawmaker who knows what they're talking about and can cite chapter and verse and things like, boy, if only everybody could be like that. But, they can't all be J.D. Vance.
I've seen this in a couple different ways, the importance of this. For example, one of our neighbors, I think I've mentioned him in the past, from Afghanistan, served as an interpreter for years for the U.S. Armed Forces, was embedded with our service members, was in combat, did everything he possibly could have to assist the U.S. military in Afghanistan. Now he and his wife are pursuing citizenship. One of them has already passed the test, and I couldn't be happier for him. They're excited to be Americans. On the flip side, I've mentioned it a million times, I moved out of Michigan in the late 90s. By 2020, I'm still on the rolls. I still might be. I don't even know. And when they sent out the automatic absentee ballot applications with respect to COVID, still getting one, as did my dad, who had passed away a year earlier. And so just the fact that that hasn't been fixed for 20 years, I mean, it's obvious that some states are doing it better than others. But the fact that this isn't an ongoing process all the time is ludicrous, because it's not that hard. When you get death records, when you get, hey, this same person with the same social security number moved into this state, that should kick back to the original state. No longer voting there. And if you live in have houses in two different states, pick one. But I mean, the federal government is making this much harder, and it always seems to be the left that doesn't want accurate rolls.
Greg, as listeners probably recall from yesterday, I'm here in Kohler, Wisconsin, where the toilets and sinks and faucets come from. And I'm at the Bradley Impact Fund conference. Everything that happens at the conference is off the record, but I guess I can quote myself. And I mentioned the odd things that come in the mail to the Columbus household in Michigan. And the general consensus was they wish everyone was as ethical as Mrs. Columbus. And, feared that there are people who will vote for someone deceased or will vote for someone who hasn't lived at that address for a long time. And that's, we don't know how much that is happening. It's probably not happening in massive numbers that would sway an election result, but you don't want to have any of it. And the fact that these ballots keep getting out there is a very annoying and ominous sign.
No, it is. And yes, my mother is very ethical, but what if she didn't live there anymore, right? What if somebody, they just sent it to last known address, they'd still send mine there, and you don't know who's living there, and would they try to, engage in some mischief or not? But the fact that they haven't updated rolls in almost a quarter of a century, not a good sign, not a good look, Michigan, and I'm guessing they're not the only ones that have that issue. All right.
Whitmer will get right on that.
Oh, after she's done feeding Doritos like a priest?
Yes.
Yeah. She's evil. That's a whole other conversation. I love Michigan, but I'm glad I don't have to deal with her on a daily basis. Anyway, what you do want to deal with on a daily basis is Lumen, because it's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. And if you want to know what's going on with your metabolism, Lumen is the best and easiest way to do that. You wake up in the morning, you grab your Lumen, take a deep breath, breathe out into the Lumen. It'll tell you what's happening right then and there. Are you burning fat? Are you burning carbs? What's the best way to guide your diet for the rest of the day, as well as tracking workouts, sleep, and even stress management? It tailors all that information well. So if you want to know what's going on with your metabolism and to do it in the simplest way possible, Lumen's the way to go.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, ideal metabolic health translates to a whole bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. And Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health.
Could not be simpler, and it could not be more helpful. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
Who is the Department of Homeland Security supposed to help? The Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski. Every day, Chris helps unpack the connection between politics and the economy and how it affects your wallet. Mayorkas is saying FEMA's running out of money. But this past year, we spent $24 billion in Ukraine, $11 billion in Israel, and billions more to smaller nations. Who are their real priorities? Whether it's happening in D.C. or down on Wall Street, it's affecting you financially. Be informed. Check out the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Jim, we just had a story last week on a number of different ways that CBS has not exactly held to the highest standards in some of the way that it's handled different things, from chastising Tony DeCopel for asking tough questions of Ta-Nehisi Coates to the bizarre editing of the Kamala Harris interview on 60 Minutes, where they spliced in an answer to a separate question and took out her word salad on the Middle East, and still not releasing the full transcript unedited. And then, of course, you've got the CBS situation where don't refer to Jerusalem as being in Israel. Well, people are still going on their programs for some reason. And on Sunday on Face the Nation, it was House Speaker Mike Johnson talking to Margaret Brennan. And so while he was shooting that interview, his people were also recording his side of the conversation. So in case it was necessary, you could see what his actual answer was. And then on social media, on X, he put out 3 examples of how his answers were badly edited or some of his key points were completely left on the floor. 2 out of the 3, the whole exchange was less than a minute. So if you're CBS, you really don't have a good explanation for that. The last one was about 2 minutes, so you might want to trim that one for time, depending on what the situation is. So what you're going to hear, this is about the SAVE Act. So back to the issue of making sure non-citizens aren't voting. The issue passed the House. Chuck Schumer didn't take it up in the Senate, so the legislation stays in limbo for now. And so here's what aired on CBS Face the Nation. And following that, and you'll tell by the difference in the audio, what Mike Johnson's answer actually was.
Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. It's not me undermining it. It's the actions of the Biden-Harris administration in some of these states. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote under federal law.
So if your issue is with certain governors, shouldn't you be talking to them?
Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. It's not me undermining it. It's the actions of the Biden-Harris administration in some of these states. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote under federal law. But the states have prohibited. We passed the SAVE Act, in the House. The SAVE Act says you've got to have proof of citizenship before you register to vote. And Chuck Schumer and the Democrats blocked that in the Senate. We could have prevented this. The questions that people have about that, but the Democrats chose not to.
So, and the answer even goes on longer than that. As I mentioned, the whole thing was about 2 minutes. So, Jim, just taking a sentence fragment, I mean, if you need to edit for time, you got to shorten the answers. But this is leaving out critical context and, his strongest point that it's the Democrats, once again, who are trying to stop this from happening.
And this is not the only controversy we've had with CBS News lately. For those of us who are veterans of the Pajama Hadeen taking on the Soronic Eye way back in 2004, it feels like there's been a plethora of them. And you have this, but apparently Harris talked to 60 Minutes for 45 minutes, and what aired was 20. You tell me there's 25 minutes on the, like, sure, some of that's, hey, how are you doing? Like small talk. But that indicates that there's big chunks of that interview that we've never seen or heard that would be of interest to voters. The argument about Ta-Nehisi Coates and his book and the question, was he questioned in an unfair way and all that kind of stuff. Mickey Kaus wrote in, I want to say 2008, that this was, McCain versus Obama. Obviously, everybody in the media world loved Obama, as well as everybody in the pop culture world and all that stuff. And Mickey Kaus started putting together this list of everybody doing their part. And I think, for example, like Family Guy did some episode where characters go back in time to Nazi Germany and they're walking around in Nazi uniforms, and there was a McCain-Palin pin on one of the Nazis' uniforms, right? And first of all, by the way, looking back, really? McCain-Palin is the Nazi-ish Republicans you're going after, right? But so it's just this idea that, well, Obama had to win, as the first major African-American nominee of a major party. He had to win. He had to win because otherwise America was a terrible racist place. I think we're seeing that same mentality at work at CBS and probably all across our media. Probably going to see it every day from now until Election Day. That there's a time and I'm sure there are a lot of people in the mainstream media who believe there's a time and a place to cover the news, and then there's a time and a place to save democracy. And if you talk to these people, they're straight up open about it. Electing Trump is the end of American democracy. He will become a dictator. We will never have a free and fair election again. People will be rounded up into camps. It is the end of the world. It is Armageddon to them. So, first of all, when you talk that much, are we all that surprised that people start taking shots at this guy? Secondly, when you talk like that, well, then of course it's all right to be biased. Of course it's all right to not be objective. Of course it's all right to hide unflattering moments for the Democratic nominee, or even somebody like Coates. The idea of, well, if you feel badly about Coates, maybe you start thinking Trump has a point, or that maybe Harris doesn't, that the left must be protected at all costs on all fronts, that this is no time for nuance. This is no time to be asking tough questions of somebody on the left on our CBS morning show. We just don't have time for that right now. Everything you see and do between now and Election Day has to be telling you there is a good party to vote for and there is a bad party to vote for. And if you are voting for the bad party, you are a bad person. And if you're voting for the good party, you're a good person. Mike Johnson, we can't air the entire 2 minutes of your answer. What do you think? We're made of time and money? What do you think? We have an entire news show? We need to cut it down, preferably in a way that makes you look or sound stupid. If we can't do that, we'll just cut it down to make you seem less effective. Right? We're going to cut out all your supporting arguments, all your supporting evidence, and we're going to just make it seem like you're asserting things. That's where we are now, and it's a really bad place for the mainstream media to be. I think they've made they've made their choice that they don't. There was a report by, was it Rufo, who observed the sections of Kamala Harris's book that were appeared to be plagiarized from Wikipedia. Yeah. And there's several sections. And the New York Times article was about how this crazy right-wing blogger says he thinks he's caught it, but clearly it didn't. We talked to experts who said it's not really, And by the way, we all know that book was ghostwritten. So, in the end, if you want to say Kamala Harris didn't, plagiarize anybody, correct, because she didn't write her own book. In the end, the ghostwriter is the one who plagiarized. By the way, you hire if you get hired for a ghostwriting gig, don't plagiarize. Don't plagiarize in general. But really don't, collect ghostwriting money, because you're making your principal look stupid there. Anyway, so this, it is egregious. It's not like we had high expectations for CBS to begin with, but I think we're just seeing it on every front. And the other thing is if this is going to happen, this is what makes Republicans say, I'm never appearing on CBS This Morning or any CBS show again, because what guarantee do I have that you're not going to cut my interview to ribbons and make it look like I said the opposite of what I actually said?
That's exactly right. So smart on his part to record his side of the conversation so you can know what was actually said. But yeah, CBS's reputation wasn't exactly stellar, as you mentioned, for a number of reasons in the years leading up to this. But they've really damaged themselves in a number of high-profile ways here. And so I also think you're making a good point about the shift we're seeing now. For as long as possible, they tried to do the hype machine, not just CBS, but the mainstream media in general for Harris. And now that they're seeing that people are still not thrilled with Kamala Harris, they're back to the five-alarm fire, and everything Trump does is, going to make your life horrible. So I think that shift is now in place and probably where we're headed till Election Day. So Jim, enjoy the rest of your time in Wisconsin. I know you'll be off tomorrow, but look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
See you Thursday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They're a huge help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Tuesday. Join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.